Let's see to the other side of the river. How would you describe Donald Trump's geopolitical strategy?
This is a very interesting thought because, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the whole communist state system in Eastern Europe collapsed, at that time, the United States basically dismissed realist foreign policy. So in US political science, in their theory, there are two branches of political science. There are the realists and the idealists. And these two branches have fought with each other ever since US political science matured after World War II. Well, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the idealists took over US foreign policy making. And the idealists then, for the next 30 years, basically made the argument that the United States was the only game in town. It had the only good set of values. Francis Fukuyama from the Rand Corporation saying, history has ended. The US model is the only model. And having said that, they then said we can use military power or any other means to basically impose our model on other countries. We'll go attack Iraq, get rid of Saddam Hussein, and build Washington, D.C. on the Euphrates River, effectively. You can make the world into America. That was the idealist foreign policy. But always there was a section of the foreign policy establishment, the realists, saying we are not into nation building. We don't want to go out and we think this is ridiculous. We don't think it's possible and so on. Mr. Trump, in his first term, was an idealist. He also believed, you can use American force, you compel other countries by force to become American. Interestingly, in this second term, he has brought in a number of realists like Elbridge Colby at the Defense Department, his major theorist for China, who makes the argument that, look, Russia is not a threat to the US. So let's not bother with the Ukraine conflict. Or in fact, Iran is not a threat to the US. Even if Iran has nuclear weapons, that doesn't threaten the US because they'd be too stupid to use it against the US. The only threat, Mr. Colby argues, is China. And so the US should concentrate on weakening China. So Mr. Trump's foreign policy is basically trying to exit the idealist worldview and to embrace the realists who say, don't waste time abroad, only do things that are good for US interests, make America great again, and so on. And so I think that's where he is. He's sort of caught between the idealists who have controlled foreign policy making for decades and the Europeans who are foreign policy idealists, in a very arrogant and annoying way, and this realist strand of US foreign policy, which says only go after conflicts in the world which impact the US. In fact, they are not isolationists. They are also very aggressive and they are also very imperialistic, but in a different kind of strategy than the idealists. And part of the clash between Brussels and Washington now with the Trump administration is between Washington's realism and Brussels' idealism.
The United States has been stepping up its military threats against Venezuela once again. Do you think these threats are credible or mainly a tool of pressure?
Well, Breno, let's think about what can be done. And one of the examples I'll give is Brazil in a second. Yeah. I mean, look, the whole thing is a fabrication. There is no cartel de los sols. That was a term invented by a Venezuelan journalist in the 1990s, before Chavez came to power, to refer to some high-ranking fellows who were involved in the drug trade, high-ranking military fellows. At the side of their uniform, they had sons. Mr. Nicolas Maduro, who is the president of Venezuela, is not the head of Cartel de los Sols because Cartel de los Sols doesn't exist. You can't be the head of something that doesn't exist unless it's, you're a hallucinatory schizophrenic or something. He is not the head. And the US government itself acknowledges most drugs come through the Pacific, not the Caribbean, 80% of them through the Pacific. This whole thing is a fabrication. Okay, they have 8 warships, including a nuclear submarine, sitting off the coast of Venezuela. It's quite serious. On one of them, the US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, made a visit. So the whole thing is very serious. It's not a joke. However, what can they do? There are about 4,000 US soldiers on these 8 ships. There are 150,000 regular Venezuelan troops in Venezuela. United States, I don't think, is prepared to invade Venezuela. They will get defeated. I mean, you can't have 4,000 people fight against 150,000. Plus, we don't know how many irregular people will take up arms. I don't think they are planning an Iraq, number one. Number two, is this, and here's the Brazilian example, is this Operation Brother Sam? In 1964, United States sent the USS Forrestal, I believe, to sit off the coast of Rio and Sao Paulo. Few American ships sat there, basically telling the Brazilian military, you can act against President Goulart, overthrow him, we'll back you up in any way. There'll be no Soviet interference, nothing. That was Operation Brother Sam. Is this Operation Brother Sam? Are they sending a message to the Bolivarian military? The Brazilian military in 1964 was very different than the Bolivarian military in 2025. I doubt very much that they'll find a general in Venezuela today who'll be willing to be their puppet. I doubt very much. The military is highly trained politically in Venezuela. They are not going to break ranks. I doubt that that'll work. Number three is, of course, the Panama strategy. Is the United States going to have a very quick bombing run on Caracas, bomb Miraflores Palace, send in some Black Hawks, try to grab Mr. Maduro, take him out of the country? Again, hugely reckless. They couldn't do a coup against Chavez in 2002. I doubt they can do a Panama in 2025. So I don't know what their military strategy is. Right now, it looks like mostly a show of force. This is a dramatic moment. The United States is stuck in so many conflicts. I mean, it's stuck in Ukraine, can't pull out of that. It's caught in Gaza, cannot get out of that. It's not ending. It's caught trying to encircle and weaken China. And then on top of that, you want to start a blistering war in Venezuela, which might turn out to be a kind of Vietnam, where Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil are opposed. I mean, I just don't think that anybody in the US is that stupid to start a war in Venezuela now, particularly when Brazil and Colombia are opposed to any conflict.
How do you assess Venezuela's ability to withstand the sanctions and attempts at isolation imposed by Washington?
I mean, Venezuela has done amazingly on this, okay? Pretty amazingly. I sometimes marvel at how they've been able to withstand the sanctions regime, because this sanctions regime is criminal and it's illegal and it's garrotic. You know, I don't know how they've done it. They've been able to break the sanctions. I mean, I mentioned earlier, India refines Russian oil. Well, unfortunately, on the 100 years of Venezuela's history, it hasn't built refining capacity, sufficient refining capacity on Venezuelan soil. It has to export its crude oil to get refined. And it had built one refinery just off the coast. That was taken away and so on. So Venezuela actually has a serious vulnerability. It has been able to build connections with a number of countries, Russia, Turkey, Iran, China to some extent, and so on, and build these into some serious trading partnerships. I mean, the United States, by sanctioning so many countries, has brought them all together. And that may be, in fact, the answer to the question. If you keep sanctioning countries, they build their own mechanisms to trade with each other. That's survival for Venezuela. The other side of it is that the Venezuelan government has improved domestic food production, has built these communes and so on, where people are producing for the Venezuelan market. This is incredible. I mean, Venezuela used to import almost, majority of its food, and now it's turning that around. So that's another way, with the large land, fertile land of Venezuela, it's possible. Countries should remember Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso's very important line. Sankara said, he who feeds you controls you. Don't let anybody control you.
Brazil has also been the target of attacks from Donald Trump. Why is Brazil seen as a strategic challenge for Washington?
Well, there's several reasons. One is that Mr. Lula has put his faith into the BRICS project, and Mr. Trump sees the BRICS as a genuine threat to the United States' attempt to maintain its hegemony in the world. He dislikes the BRICS intensely. Marco Rubio had said in a television program before he became Secretary of State that de-dollarization is dangerous because it means the U.S. power over countries will decrease. They won't be so financially dependent on the U.S. So for this particular reason, he doesn't like the Lula government. Secondly, Mr. Trump sees in Jair Bolsonaro a kindred figure, that they are sort of political twins, and wants to help Mr. Bolsonaro. I mean, look, there's a real danger in using some concepts that are not sufficiently rigorous, like the concept lawfare. The concept lawfare was used when we talked about President Dilma being removed from office, or President Lula getting hounded in the Lavo Jato case. And so now Trump is using it. He's saying he's a victim of lawfare. Yeah. He's using the term to describe what's happening to Mr. Bolsonaro. They have a kindred relationship. He wants to make sure that the Bolsonaristas come in at the next presidential election. They're going to do everything they can to interfere in the Brazilian election. That I can tell you directly. And I think the third reason why the United States is keen on shifting the balance of power in Brazil is, I think they smell something happening in Latin America. They smell that underneath Mexico, there is a rightward turn taking place in Latin America. Bukeleism, Bukele, the president of El Salvador, Bukeleism, this idea that you should allow your government to just go and kill drug dealers and so on, is infectious among sections of the middle class and even of the very poor. They don't want to see their neighborhoods racked with guns and drug gangs and so on. Bukeleism is striking a chord as far down as Chile. Maybe Milei was hammered at the Buenos Aires elections, but that doesn't mean that the right may not prevail again. In Argentina, what does the left have to offer if the right is going to say, we'll take care of crime, give us the Bukele mandate? So I think they sniff that there's a turning happening, that even in Colombia, the right might return. And if in Brazil, the right comes back, that's a right-wing consolidation. It's a little bit like the game of Risk, Breno. If they can take Latin America, then they consolidate their hemisphere, and then they move on elsewhere.
Finally, how do you see President Lula's foreign policy, especially the balance between deepening ties with the BRICS and maintaining relations with the West?
I mean, Mr. Lula is, and you know much better than I, Mr. Lula is a tightrope walker. He is a very good walker through narrow spaces. There's something quite spectacularly brilliant about his political tactics. And I think he's dancing he's in a very delicate situation. People who expect him to be harder and tougher and more, BRICS oriented and so on, I don't think they fully understand.
More Chavez style.
More Chavez. I think they don't understand Brazilian society and Brazilian politics. I mean, and again, of course, you know this and your viewers know this much more than I, but I've always felt that Brazil is instinctively, at this point, a center-right country. It's not a center-left or a left-wing country. I mean, your National Assembly is a right-leaning National Assembly. He has to deal with that. It's not a country with an instinctively left-wing, revolutionary kind of social agenda. Mr. Chavez had to really fight to build that in Venezuela. It wasn't delivered to him. They had to build it. And in Brazil, it's not been easy to build such a consensus. Many of the provinces are governed by the right. And I think that's the role. Lula is a tactician. His own government is a unity government. It's not a left-wing government. He has to run a unity government. So I understand where he is. I appreciate him for what he does, given where he is. And I think that's the only sensible approach to take. To be overly critical of Mr. Lula is a mistake. You should be overly critical of Brazilian society, not Mr. Lula. It's not Mr. Lula's fault that Brazilian society is a center-right society.